But the majority of the comments, and this is where I want to focus, the majority of the comments were, however, about those people choosing to take the good with the bad. It's about taking the good things, picking and choosing the good out of the bad. When it comes to the gospel, when it comes to Jesus Christ, the one true Jesus, which is, he's the Jesus of the gospel, we do not compromise. We don't compromise. We stand for the truth. So the best way I can put it, and I've said this same exact thing when it comes to when I talk about how Bethel and Hillsong and Elevation and Maverick City Music and Passion and Tribal and all these groups out there are evil and tools that Satan is using. I always I've used this argument for those things before, and I'm going to use it again for The Chosen because it still applies. Say, and just pretend, say that you're the head pastor of a church. Say that you're the head pastor of a church. You are a biblically sound, Bible-based church. You don't play that music in your church. You preach according to the gospel, the correct gospel. You preach the correct Jesus. You go verse by verse, and you are 100% biblically sound. Now, say Joel Osteen comes up to you, and he's up front. He's like, I know what you think about me. I know you know about what I believe in and my theology, how it's very incorrect and stuff. Say he's up front with you. But he offers you and says, I would love to preach one sermon in your church, and I will make sure that it is 100% biblically sound and 100% accurate, and it is about the one true Jesus of the gospel. Would you allow him to do that? I'm going to say the majority of you would say no. Why is that? Because you know his background. You know his theology. You understand what he believes, and you understand that he's definitely possessed. He's possessed. Joel Osteen is possessed. I mean, there's no other way to put it. But you know his theology and how jacked up it is. And you know how wrong it is. You would not be willing to compromise. You would not be willing to pick and choose that one sermon, the one good sermon, and allow it to go in front of your church, in front of your pulpit. You wouldn't allow. You would not pick and choose that one good part from what you know is bad in the background, because you know where he comes from. The same thing applies to The Chosen. We know for a fact, it is fact, that the production team behind The Chosen is Mormon. We know for a fact, it is a fact, that Jonathan Rumi, the guy who plays Jesus on the show, is a devout Catholic who pushes rosary, who kneels to the Pope, is a part of the show. We know for a fact that Jallis Jenkins either doesn't know the difference between the Mormon Jesus and the Christian Jesus, or he does, and he lies about it and antagonizes people so much so that he does not get any conviction when he puts a troll post on Facebook mocking and making fun of Jesus Christ on the cross. Those are all facts. That is the background of the show. So if you just said that you would not allow Joel Osteen to come in and preach a biblically sound sermon in front of your church, there is no way that you should be able to allow yourself to watch the Chosen show because you know the background of what that show is. It is exactly the same thing. And if you're going to sit there and say, no, I won't allow Joe Osteen to do that, but the Chosen thing is a different situation, you are a hypocrite. I said it. Guess what? Every single one of us has been a hypocrite in this world before, at least once. But you have just been hypocritical because you said you wouldn't allow Joel Osteen, even though you know his background is jacked up, you wouldn't pick and choose his one good sermon. But you'll go ahead and watch The Chosen even though you know their background is jacked up. Why would you watch The Chosen if you're not going to allow Joel Osteen to come preach at your church? I'm going to throw this up. Galatians 1, 6 through 10. I marvel that you are turning away so soon from him who called you in the grace of Christ to a different gospel. Different gospel. This is Paul. Remember that. Which is not another, but there are some who trouble you and want to pervert the gospel of Christ. Pervert the gospel of Christ. We'll get back to that. But even if we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel to you than what we have preached to you, let him be accursed. And Paul goes and says it again. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone preaches any other gospel to you than what you have received, let him be accursed. For do I now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I still pleased men, I would not be a bond servant of Christ. Which is, verse 7, which is not another, but there are some who trouble you and want to pervert the gospel of Christ. You know what Mormonism is? It's a perversion of the gospel of Christ. You know what Catholicism is? It is a perversion of the gospel of Christ. Do you know who leads The Chosen show? Two religions, man-made religions, who pervert the gospel of Christ. That's who leads The Chosen. You cannot sit there and pick and choose the good out of a show that not only admitted that it is about breaking down the walls and combining religions, but you also can't pick and choose from a show that is led by two religions that pervert the gospel of Christ. And that is so important, Paul said it twice. He said it twice. You can't compromise the gospel. We talked about how God gives specific warnings to two subjects. He specifically gives warnings about these subjects. You do not mess with them. We just talked about one, the kids. God does not take kindly to people messing with his little ones. And the other one is the gospel. So much so that Paul had to say it twice in that verse alone. So again, I ask you the question. If Joel Osteen came to your church and he said he will preach a biblically sound sermon about the one true Jesus, would you allow him to do it? No? Then stop watching The Chosen. It's a different Jesus. It is a different gospel. So much so that even the actress who plays Mary Magdalene said it is an esoteric version of the Bible, an occultic version of the Bible. Once we start picking and choosing, we lose. Once you let certain things start creeping in, and I specifically talk about Bethel, Hillsong, and Elevation music, when you start letting that stuff come in, it starts perverting everything. It is a cancer, and it will devour all of it. And the Chosen's going to do the same thing. The best way I can put it is if somebody's theology is jacked up, if they say something that is theologically incorrect and it's not a misspeak. There's plenty of biblically sound pastors that have misspeaks all the time. We're human. But you know that that's not what they mean when they say it. But if you have theology like Mormonism and Catholicism, that you know the theology is jacked up, one false thing, we are to throw it all out. We don't pick and choose the good. You don't pick and choose the good. You throw the whole thing out. And that's that. That's my response. That's my message as far as that goes. You don't compromise the gospel. You don't compromise the gospel. You don't. Paul was pretty clear about that, as we just read.